listening in. It applies to everybody that they may want to become an informant. Everyone. Children, parents, relatives, whatever. So you become a nation of informants like East Germany, and you become a democratic republic like the German Democratic Republic. And that's what we've been on the way of becoming. That's what the power that they have right now. We are a turnkey away from a tyranny in this country right now. We're not, this is not a police state, or we wouldn't be here in this meeting. We would be in detention. We certainly wouldn't be allowed to say that. But it could become a police state almost overnight. The entire infrastructure has been laid for it. The constitutional basis that would stand in the way has been waved away by a succession of presidents right now. When I mention Dianne Feinstein, I'm mentioning a symbol of the fact that the notion of oversight in this country has become a fraud, a hoax. The same is true of this court. When our president says, don't worry about this program, it's been shown to be lawful by our lawyers internally, like Berkeley's own John Yoo, YLO, who happens to be a constitutional lawyer like Barack Obama, a scholar. And I think, by the way, I have to say this, and this is not a joke, as far as I can tell, of the same view, the same ilk, the two of them. So being a constitutional lawyer is not enough either. By the way, it doesn't mean that you can't be courageous and a free person. Glenn Greenwald is also a constitutional lawyer. But the president has said in this week now, relevant to Snowden, he says, don't worry about it. It's not only our own lawyers, it's not only our internal due process. Another big joke that came up here when it was a question of where does the president get the authority to assassinate anyone, including an American citizen, anywhere in the world, which means, by the way, that Snowden is in danger now and knows it perfectly well. Where does he get that? And the Attorney General said, due process, we have internal processes within the executive branch. In other words, due process has been abolished, in effect, as an acting requirement in the Constitution. Barack Obama continues to say, and it's been overseen by the courts and by the Congress. Okay, the courts, the FISA court, which has had over tens of thousands of requests for warrants, up to this one, which is the broadest warrant in the history of the world, actually, but individual warrants, and modified or refused 6 of them. In other words, it is what Russell Tice, the former NSA analyst, has called a kangaroo court with a rubber stamp. So the notion of an independent judiciary here ruling on this is a mockery. Then he says Congress, again, like the FISA court, the intelligence committees exist because of the Church Committee back in 1975, following Watergate and the Pentagon Papers trial and the abuses then. I was overheard on warrantless wiretaps, for example, which figured then in impeachment proceedings against a president and led to his resignation. Now, allegedly legal by action of the Congress. But how about this particular blatantly unconstitutional action, blessed by the Intelligence Committee, which was set up, as I say, as a result of the church reforms. Again, that means total, he failed, George failed. He tried to get these things under control. The oversight committees are a failure. The FISA court is a failure. Both of them require investigation themselves, and that has to be by a select committee of Congress, which has to be pressed by the public, which will not be chaired by Dianne Feinstein, must not be. In fact, she shouldn't be on it. She should be impeached or required whatever. But she won't be. She won't be. So we're in bad trouble. But thanks to Snowden and the fact of documents that actually do pull away the curtain on the Wizard of Oz here at last, there's a chance a chance, it's small, it's not more likely than not, it's less likely than not, it's very unlikely, but it's possible that the public will, as Wyden and Udall have been telling us now for several years in a letter last year, that the public will be, quote, stunned, as they put it, by the interpretations that have been put on by Obama and by Bush on this, on the Patriot Act, which should be repealed, absolutely. And that is doable. In fact, the Bill of Rights Defense Committee here, which Nadia represents, I well remember the town meetings against the Patriot Act years ago when it was put in. I spoke at several of those, and of course they were absolutely right. It's been renewed automatically with even growing majorities by whether the Congress is controlled by Democrats or Republicans here. That has to change if we are to recover our freedoms. And it's really possible, I won't say more than that, if we do what we should do. And if we take courage from people like Bradley Manning and Snowden, who have, like Nathan Hale, which now a lot of you I've discovered to my horror, most of you probably don't remember, but he was the first person, actually the first person and the last person before me as an American to be tried for giving secrets to Americans. He was hanged by the British, actually as a spy for George Washington. And his last words before he was hanged was, "I regret that I have but one life to give for my country." Now Snowden and Bradley Manning have given their lives for their country, and it was worth it. They were not crazy for doing that. They were not excessive. If either of them had asked me what they should do, if Snowden had asked me, I would have said, I can't tell any individual what they should do with their life and what their commitments are to their family and to everything else, but I will say this information is worth a life, worth more than one life, worth a life in prison, as I thought the Pentagon Papers were. And I appreciate the fact that we have Americans who will rise to that, and I hope there are a lot more.
Dan, you already answered the little sub-question about what we can do. Eloquent. Birgitta, your question, and you've traveled the world on your own without a powerful organization, without a powerful website. You've been in many, many different areas and advocate for freedom. So your question is, what were your concerns of becoming a plaintiff litigant in the NDAA case? How does the state of civil liberties in the United States affect the rest of the world?
Well, I decided to, well, when I became branded, I've had two terrorist labels on me. I'm an environmental terrorist and I'm a cyber terrorist. Because of that, and it wasn't just some people that said I was a cyber terrorist for being an active volunteer with Wikileaks. And it so happened that around the time I was a part of it, all these huge leaks came in. You know, I had no idea that that would be happening, but I would still have done it, just to make that clear. And I would have still have participated in putting out the Collateral Murder video, even if I knew what consequences that would have. It heavily restricted my possibilities, for example, to be able to come here. I was in Berkeley actually, and it's kind of funny. So we just released the Collateral Murder video. It was on April 5th, 2010, and I was here in Berkeley at the university speaking about the Icelandic Media Initiative, which is sort of to make Iceland into a safe haven of freedom of information, expression, and speech. And Julian Assange was also speaking there. We had just released this video, and it was the last time I could go to the States, because after that the cables came and the Afghan war laws and the Iraq war laws. And I really want to encourage you actually to go, even if it's sort of forbidden in the United States, if you hold any sort of public office or civil servant, to read the stuff that's revealed on the Wikileaks website. And you can even end up in prison if you forward leaks that are being published on Wikileaks, like Barrett Brown, who incidentally was digging very deep into tripwire, which is one of these things that is also a part of this matrix of the NSA. So I was advised, it wasn't my own paranoia the reason why I didn't come to the United States. It was both my lawyers in the United States and the Icelandic State Department that said, look, you shouldn't go, you shouldn't take a risk. And in the end, I thought to myself, and this is one of the reasons I joined and became a plaintiff of the NDAA. When I heard about it, it was just so bizarre that you could actually just let people vanish. You know, the military could let people vanish. Not only Americans, but anybody on the suspicion of terrorism. And since I was a double terrorist, and what worries me is the fact that the line between activism and terrorism is so thin, and it's a deep concern. So in the end, I thought, okay, am I going to have fear of what could possibly maybe happen, control my life, or am I going to challenge this? And this is why I went for the first time to the United States in April this year to raise awareness about Bradley Manning and the video. It marked the 3 years of the release. And unfortunately, way too many people haven't seen it. So one thing you can do is, why don't you show it? Do you have video nights and show it to your friends, show it in your communities, project it on walls. You know, there are lots of ways to wake people up, and this video was one of these. Well, I was already awake, but it sort of pushed me to do more when I saw it. The reason why I decided to come as well was, in April, was I've been a member of Parliament for 4 years, and the term was running out, and I had created a new political movement. I like to make new political movements because you shouldn't look at being in servitude as a career. It's just a temporary experiment in democracy. So I didn't know if I would be re-elected. So I have a little bit more shield as a parliamentarian than an ordinary citizen. So I made it okay. I didn't have any incidents, but it was a massive effort to get in here. I had to have the Icelandic State Department talk to the Department of Justice. I had a meeting with the ambassador of the United States just to make clear, you know, my intentions and to have a discussion with him. And I think, how many of you know who Aaron Swartz was? I think his untimely death woke up a lot of people. And I think, and I have no idea what the motivations of Snowden are, but I think the courage and the clarity of, for example, Bradley Manning in this incredible statement that was leaked from these secret trials has been an incredible inspiration, at least for me. And if you haven't heard it, seek it and listen to this young man. If people brand him as a terrorist, as a traitor, as an enemy of the state, they are un-American. And so they could use the NDAA on Snowden. He can vanish, and we will never hear what happened to him. He might never go to trial. Is he a terrorist? No. The concept of terrorism is no longer what I thought it was. I mean, it's basically put into just about everything. But I think it is very important to set an example. So, like, for example, I happen to be a pragmatic anarchist, and many of my friends were like, "Whoa, what are you doing going into office? What the hell is wrong with you? You're going to go into the system that you're trying to sort of crack open, destroy." Well, we happen to have like a really incredibly good crisis in Iceland. You know, how many of you have read or seen the film The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein? Great. The rest of you haven't seen it or read it, read it. Because it is about times of crisis when bad and dangerous laws are passed. Now, I have very good news for you. It can be the other way around. And so, when we had this good crisis, weirdos like me got into Parliament. I never have had any aspirations to be in service in Parliament. I am just an ordinary activist and a poet. The reason why I wanted to go in was that I recognized that I had been knocking on these doors, you know, for ages to get, you know, my agenda, the things that I was concerned about, discussed with my servants. And that, I mean, is the representatives. And it's very hard. I mean, I'm sure that very many of you have tried to knock on the doors of Congress people or senators, and you probably never made it inside. Because it's hard. Because they're only representing themselves anyway. They are representing the 1%, most of them, unfortunately. Now, I wanted to make a bridge. I wanted to make a bridge between the general public and the parliament. There were no politicians in my political movement, and it's now been dissolved because it was a hit and run. We wanted just to get certain things changed, and that included a new constitution. And the reason why it's important to do a new constitution is not because ours changing the constitution would have changed everything and we would not have had the third largest financial collapse in the history of humankind. No, it is so important to discuss among everybody what sort of society do you want to live in? What is your social agreement? And even if you would choose exactly the same stuff that's in the current constitution, you still have to make this agreement. And there are many things that are lacking in our current constitution. And these things are about the very fundamentals of our democracies today, because our democracies today are not the same as they were when the constitutions of this world were sort of, the basis of them were crafted. And it is also important to know that constitution is a living thing. It is us. It is not written in stone. It is us. And so we set out to create a new constitution because we used to be colonized by Denmark until 1944, and nobody ever believed we could get out of this this very unhealthy colonist and colony marriage. But the Second World War came, and it was a really splendid opportunity to say, hey, you are occupied, you can't occupy us. So we got our independence, but we got a recycled constitution from the Danish king. And it's never been ours, really. And I think it was actually a guy here, I think his name was Thomas Jefferson, that said the constitution should be revised by every generation. How many times has each generation here done that since he said that? So, I mean, constitution is not sacred, it's not the 10 Commandments, it is the social agreement. So, since I made it into Parliament, anybody can, and it is important to go in there like a hacker and understand how the system works, because if you can't change it if you don't know how it works. You can't fix a watch if you don't know how the watch works. So don't be afraid to go in. You just have to make sure that people don't consider it to be a career. It is only servitude. And finally, since there is this one point I want to remind you about in regard to what Snowden said. And he said, the policy needs to change. And do not let this become a ping-pong politics. Do not let the responsibility of this go